Welcome to this edition of The Leader's Corner, a podcast dedicated to bringing you the voices of Army Reserve leadership in a way that's engaging, vibrant, and informational. I'm your host, Sergeant First Class Jeremiah Richardson. Listen, folks, this past year has been difficult. Many of us have struggled with COVID, and others have struggled to take care of us while we recover. Many have been unemployed or shuttered in their homes trying to make life work. And some of us in the Army Reserve have had the privilege to be on the front line in this mess. Our medical personnel have assisted civilian hospitals, our logistics personnel have ensured we could get them there, and our plans and operations folks are the brilliance behind it all. Well, today we have one of those very special soldiers in for this podcast. He might actually be one of the most critical personnel during this most recent phase of the pandemic. His name is Major Chip Autry. Currently, he's a Joint Transportation Officer with the Army Reserve element of European Command. He has been to Iraq and Kuwait multiple times as an infantry officer and a logistician. He has been a logistician for the last 4 years in the Army Reserve. He has degrees from the College of William & Mary and New York University. He's also from Johnson City, Tennessee, and currently, now listen closely, is Supply Chain Director at GlaxoSmithKline Consumer Healthcare. This looks like it will be the perfect fit sort of story. Major Autry, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Sergeant Richardson. It's good to be here.
Now, this is all really amazing sounding stuff, and you sound kind of like a superhero, but I also hear you have a slight obsession with birds.
I don't think that I have an obsession with birds, but I am a birder, which is, I haven't met a lot of other birders in the military. But yeah, it's a fun activity my family and I enjoy, and we've participated in the World Series of Birding in New Jersey, where we live now, the last 4 years, I think we've done it.
Wow.
And we're already registered to go again this May. So yeah, it's a fun thing to do.
So your whole family gets involved?
Absolutely. It's for the whole family.
That's really cool. I mean, do you have equipment for that, or
just binoculars? That's all you need, in a book with a list of birds in it. It's pretty easy.
Sounds like a lot less equipment than you have necessarily for this job now, anyway.
Exactly.
So for those of you who do not know, the Department of Defense has just completed a mission called Operation Warp Speed, which had to do with an accelerated vaccine rollout. Major Autry, you had something to do with that, didn't you?
I did. So I joined the organization last November as a planner in the plan cell. Operation Warp Speed was the federal government's attempt to accelerate the development, manufacturing, and distribution of a vaccine for the COVID-19 virus, which we're all living through that pandemic right now. And it's part of the whole of America approach to tackling it. And it's a joint effort between the Department of Defense and Health and Human Services, especially CDC.
Now you say planner, like that's a pretty vague title. What does that entail?
So I've been a bit of a jack of all trades since I've joined Operation Warp Speed. So the first month that I got here, we hadn't released any emergency use authorizations for any vaccines yet. So that was where I was heavily into planning. Especially, we did a lot of tabletop exercises to work with our partners in industry, as well as our partners in the federal government, to kind of role play what is this rollout going to look like once the emergency use authorizations are approved. And then also, how would we react to things going wrong? I specifically led a series of 4 meetings where we were briefing a major general on how we would respond to situations like power outages causing problems with the refrigerators, or product going above the temperature restrictions while in transit. Just basically, if something goes wrong, how would we react to it? And we tried to war game that out before it actually happened, so our response time would be a little quicker when it actually happened.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Forward planning sort of stuff.
Yeah, that was the first month. When we went into December and the emergency use authorizations got approved, the plan cell augmented the vaccine operations center. We went to 24-hour operations. So I was into operations for the month of December as we were starting to push vaccines out for the first time. And since the new year, my focus has been on transition. At some point, the DoD is going to get out of the vaccine business and hand this off to our HHS partners completely. That's really Health and Human Services, what they focus on. So I've been heavily involved in supporting that transition effort and making sure it's a seamless handoff between the DoD and Health and Human Services.
That sounds like a lot of hours.
It's been a busy couple of months.
I imagine. With that in mind, like where were you guys operating?
So we operate out of the Health and Human Services building in Washington, D.C. You can see the Capitol from our rooftop. It's about half a mile away. It's I was a government major in college, and every government major kind of dreams of like working in DC at some point. And so I'm kind of scratching that itch with this role right now, living in DC for this period.
Nice. I want to take it back a little bit more when you're talking about the interagency stuff.
Sure.
I'm looking at your bio, and it seems like your civilian expertise had something to do with you being selected for that position. Can you talk to me a little bit about how you got that opportunity and what that interaction means?
Yeah. So I think that I was able to get this position because of what I do with GlaxoSmithKline, which is a pharmaceutical company. And, to be transparent, it is one of the companies that's working on a vaccine for COVID-19 and hopes to go into third stage trials this summer. I found out about this opportunity. I received an email that had the job posting. They were recruiting 3 planners for Operation Warp Speed. I sent an email asking for more information about it. I was curious, and I actually received an email back from ForceCom saying the position had been filled. And then I got a phone call 3 hours later, and they said they'd read my resume and wanted to know if I would still be interested in the position. And I said that I was. So I think that my experience in supply chain with GlaxoSmithKline, that experience combined with my experience previously at Unilever working in the ice cream department on their cold chain supply chain, both of those really kind of lent those experiences to something I could support in the distribution planning here at Operation Warp Speed. The 2 vaccines that have been approved so far both require extensive refrigeration and freezer supply chains to move them. They have to be kept at very, very low temperatures. That's
funny. I mean, the ice cream guy, you're not an ice cream man, but your experience in ice cream helped you with COVID. That's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. When I learned about the opportunity, I looked at what they were looking for, and I looked at my background as an Army logistician and working in corporate supply chain. And I said, all the stars seem to line up that this was really a position I should be helping with.
It's like a glove.
Yeah.
Yeah. You feel like a glove. I mean, how cool is that? How often does it happen that your civilian background lines up with what would be needed as a critical position in a national emergency? I mean, how did that make you feel to be a part of that?
I was extremely proud to be a part of that, and I was grateful for the opportunity to do it. I hope, you guys said, how often does this happen? I hope it's a once in a lifetime opportunity. I hope I'm not needed for any more opportunities at a national strategic level, as it was explained to me when I was interviewing for this position. But no, it's a really cool feeling to know, even in a small way, that I'm really making a difference. Me, like everybody else, has really taken a kick in the rear from COVID. So any opportunity I can to, turn around and beat that, and hopefully at some point in the near future get us back to a normal. I felt compelled to take that opportunity.
It also shows one of the unique things about the Army Reserve, and I've seen this in other career fields in the Army as well, especially like the engineers, where you might have a guy who owns his own construction company, but he's a sergeant or a specialist, and he has so much expertise, they can't help but say, hey, let's go listen to this guy. He knows what he's talking about.
Right. Yeah. No, you're right. That is a unique thing about both the Army Reserve and the National Guard, is you have a wealth of experiences that just aren't there in active duty. And sometimes that can be a real benefit to the mission.
In this case, it was critical actually for the rollout for our nation, the vaccine rollout. I'm
sure they could have done it without me.
That's true. Yeah, I'm sure we would have found somebody, but you were just a great fit and perfect for what was needed. Right?
It was a good fit. Yeah, I agree.
Yes. So, you're talking about an awful lot of vaccines rolling out here. What do you know about how many vaccines we're talking about?
I know exactly how many we're talking about. So we're looking at 6 vaccines right now that are all in the pipeline. 2 have already received emergency use authorizations from the FDA. The FDA operates completely independently of what we're doing here. So they are independent of everything. And when they approve it, it's because the science backs up that vaccine is ready to be approved and released and is safe for the public. So 2 were released in December. We have an additional 2 vaccines that I think in the very near term will be submitted for an emergency use authorization. And I'm very hopeful that they will both receive approval. And there is an additional 2 that are still in progress that should be coming later this year. I'm very excited about the Janssen vaccine that's coming out here shortly. It's a 1-shot vaccine instead of 2 shots, like the 2 current vaccines that we have on the market. And that's really going to help in our vaccination efforts and really speed up the process of reaching herd immunity.
Oh, yeah. And that's obviously what we're shooting for. Now, I want to ask you from your place, your position. Obviously, you can't speak for the DoD, so I'm going to ask your opinion.
Sure.
Like, why do you think the Department of Defense, and in your case, the Army, was needed in order to make this happen?
The DoD led this joint effort between HHS and the DoD because we bring a wealth of experience when it comes to wide-scale logistics. So the DoD operates an enterprise around the globe with our bases and our troops all over the globe, and we just have a very, very strong, robust supply chain. Which is what we needed to do. Again, our focus was on development, manufacturing, and distribution. 2 out of those 3 are really related to supply chains, which the Army does supply chain very well. I know everyone, when they think about the Army, they think about combat power. But in the background, there is a pretty phenomenal supply chain going on to support all that. I also want to stress that the DoD was brought in to be additive to the effort to fight COVID, not to replace anything. The DoD was adding to the whole of America approach along with HHS, not to replace what was being done, because HHS and the CDC in particular are absolutely critical to this effort. And we could not do what we do without them. They are the science experts on combating this pandemic, and we really rely on them for a lot of things.
Yeah, those interagency relationships are critical in these national emergencies. And also, hey, we all remember, at least us enlisted on my side of the house, what it was like to be in basic training and be lined up for vaccinations. So I know we're good at figuring that part out, how to herd us through like cattle. So I'm sure bringing that experience to the fight really helps.
And again, not speaking for this organization and not speaking for the DoD, but just solely speaking as Major Autry, I highly encourage every service member, especially my brothers and sisters in the Army Reserve, to get your shot when you have the opportunity to do so.
I can't imagine like all the logistical challenges that needed to be overcome for this operation. Unprecedented, all those words. Can you briefly outline some of the hardest ones that you know of for those of us who don't speak logistics?
Sure. Probably the biggest challenge was around the cold chain. So a lot of people are familiar with the term supply chain, but when you hear the term cold chain, that's really just doing everything that a normal supply chain does, all while keeping something at a frozen temperature, which introduces additional challenges. In particular, the Pfizer vaccine required super industrial freezers to keep it cold enough and refrigerated enough, more than what you could do with the refrigerator in your home. Very, very low temperatures required to keep the Pfizer vaccine stable. So actually coordinating for all those freezers at the distribution sites, moving the product around. For the Pfizer vaccine, the Pfizer actually developed a cardboard insulated box with dry ice that would keep the product at the correct temperature during shipping. It doesn't sound very sexy, but it's a very, very important cardboard box, which has really helped in the distribution of product across the country and across the world. So the cold chain was a very challenging part of this. Another challenging part was the ancillary kits. So in addition to the vaccine going out, we also needed to send out the hypodermic needles, the gloves, the face masks, the alcohol wipes, everything that the people doing the vaccinations would need to actually support giving the vaccine. Okay. And in some cases, that product is shipping from 2 different locations. With the Moderna vaccine, McKesson is handling all shipments. But with the Pfizer vaccine, products are being shipped by FedEx and UPS, while the ancillary kits are still being shipped by McKesson. And we have to make sure that when that Pfizer vaccine arrives at the vaccination site, there's also a ancillary kit arriving at the same time. because if you have the vaccine, but you don't have the needles to inject it with, it doesn't do you a whole lot of good. So actually managing between those three shippers, getting everything to show up at the right place at the right time, has been quite a challenge.
Oh, I'll bet. That makes a lot of sense because of all the moving parts and trying to get them to sync up. Just like any sort of mission that we run in the Army, you can do all the planning in the world, but when the rubber meets the road,
right,
you find out not everything syncs up. This mission has taken a lot of your time. What does that cost you?
So being on this mission has cost time for me. It's cost me time away from my family. I actually just got back from a deployment to Kuwait in March of 2020. So wasn't home quite a year before I was put on full-time orders again. It's also cost me time away from my civilian employer, GSK. I'm very fortunate. GSK is a very supportive company and has my back in this. I'm very lucky to have the support that I do from my civilian employer. And I recognize that not everybody is as lucky as I am in the reserves. I've heard some horror stories. But I consider myself well supported, and I try to recognize them for what they do as well. I've given my manager in the past, I've nominated, and she's received the Patriot Award, and I have nominated my employer for the DoD Freedom Award this year, just for all they do for the reservists and National Guard within their company.
This marriage between military and civilian careers you've just described is really hard to find. How do you manage to do it?
Yeah, I'd say my civilian career and Army career has followed similar lines of effort, I guess you could say. When I left active duty in 2012, I did move from working in the Army supply chain to working in corporate supply chain. And I was able to get a position in a corporate supply chain world because of my Army supply chain experience. So I kind of built upon what I already knew. Having a supportive civilian employer is obviously a big part of it, but that involves building trust and always being transparent with them with what's going on and giving them enough notice when I'm going to miss work. Finding an Army unit that does something I care about and has people that I enjoy working with is obviously important. Yeah. We put in a lot of hours. So if you're putting in hours on something you don't enjoy, it's tougher to stay focused and perform well at it. And obviously the biggest key ingredient to me being successful has been the support of my family. My wife has been with me since I was a lieutenant on active duty. She is a Army wife through and through. And I'm extremely fortunate to have her and the support that she gives me. And, I couldn't manage all this without her having my back.
Yeah, our families don't often get enough credit, especially for successful soldiers.
Yeah, I agree, but they really are. If you're lucky enough to have a spouse who is very supportive, it can make a world of difference. Yeah,
I noticed that when I talk to other soldiers and my young soldiers when I've been a training NCO, the ones that have problems with their employers, I mean, there are lots of stories and lots of reasons, but there's something that's pretty consistent. You mentioned it, that you did it, and that's that giving your employer enough notice. and I do know that doesn't always happen for Army reasons, but then there's a lot of times where you can take the time to do that.
It's tough. Short notice stuff does come up for sure. But I'm also, a manager, and I do hire people within GSK for my team. So I kind of know both sides of it, being an employee and also being a manager. So yeah, I try to give as much notification as I can to my employer and build that trust, and also to share with them why I'm doing what I'm doing. It was obviously not easy to go back and ask them, to support me while I went back on orders less than a year. And I got back after a 10-month deployment. Yeah. But when I kind of shared why I was doing it and the mission we were supporting, they were on board. So I was very lucky to have their support.
Yeah. Yeah. And just being able to understand that whole side of it and, added to the military side, that's just a great opportunity. Now, how do you take, you have these two realms of experience, and they're not they're similar, but they're not necessarily the same. What things do you take from the civilian side and apply them to the military side? And then I'll ask you vice versa from the military side to the civilian side.
That's a good question.
So first, we'll ask, from the civilian side to the military side.
Yeah, sure. I would say the experiences and the practices that I have on the civilian side that I bring over to the military side, which support me, are applying a little more data-centric approach to problem solving, and trying to work smarter rather than harder. I remember when I was, active duty, it was really, what's the fastest way we can get this done? And just, I want to see results immediately. In some circumstances, it's better just to take a minute to sit back and think about it and apply some, look for some data, especially with really complex problem. Look, what does the data support? Right? I mean, it's one thing to make a slide turn green. It's another thing to know, am I actually accomplishing what the goal is behind the scenes? So maybe taking a little time, thinking a little more about the solution before executing, and applying a little more rigor around the data to support the course of action you're proceeding against. I would say that I bring that from my experience working in corporate over to what I do in the military. But then vice versa, I'd say there is some value in the Army's no-fail mentality, right? As a logistician, you can never win a battle, but you can sure as heck be the reason it was lost, right? If you're not showing up with the equipment, with the fuel, with the chow, and a maneuver unit has to disengage because you didn't give them the support they needed, that's unacceptable. So I do, and I have brought a focus on mission accomplishment, and don't run into an obstacle without either going over it, around it, or under it, right? That attitude that I developed in the military is really what I think I brought to working in the civilian side. So
it's like you have the extreme commitment to accomplish the mission, but you don't have to only use a hammer.
Right. Yeah. There you go. Exactly.
There are other tools in the tool bag.
There are other tools, and some of those tools might take a little longer, but you're actually probably going to see better results, and it's going to go a little smoother in the long run. Yeah. And it's going to have a longer lasting impact too. Right.
Better, well, when it's better planned out, you're going to have longer, better second and third order effects rather than just immediate, as you say, turn green. And those of us kind of know what that means.
You got to get that slide turn green.
Yeah. But let's have it stay green.
Exactly.
Temporarily be green until the next briefing.
Exactly.
So last question, I promise. What does your future look like?
So I finish here with this organization this month. So I'll be heading back to New Jersey and back to my full-time civilian job as a supply chain director with GlaxoSmithKline. I'll also be going back to Army Reserve Element UCOM. I've been there for about a year. I'm targeting finishing out a 2-year joint tour with them, and then I'm hoping to move to a battalion XO slot. So it's been really interesting operating at the COCOM and national strategic level, but I'm actually really excited about getting back to a battalion and actually being hands-on with soldiers again.
Yeah, get with the Joes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, sir, it's been a pleasure to have you.
It's been great speaking to you, Sergeant.
We wish you the best of luck in your future career and hope that you can get much needed family time while staying safe. Folks, that's it for this edition of the Leader's Corner. If you want to know more about the recently completed Operation Warp Speed or the Army Reserve's other responses to the COVID-19 pandemic, please go to usar.army.mil. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again. Stay safe, everyone, and get vaccinated when you can.